All right.
Okay, I want to start today off by asking a question. I don't want it to be too personal, but whether it was a slap on the wrist or a full-on whipping with a belt, how many people have been physically disciplined by their parents in their life? Sweet, 100%. Well, according to a study done by Psychology Benefits, over 90% of people have been physically disciplined by their parents at once. Their parents may not know the damage that they're doing or the ongoing effects that may occur with the child. But this is important to everybody in this room because we either are parents or we want to be one day at some point. So it's important. So I will persuade you today that physical discipline does not need to be incorporated into parenting, and there are negative effects that come with it. And I'll do this by giving you reasons why some parents may use physical discipline and some effects of physical discipline and alternatives to physically disciplining your child. So some reasons that parents physically discipline their kids, according to a study done by George Holden of SMU, who is funded by the National Health Institute and works for the Department of Health. He says that the views of the technique, so whether or not your parents grew up with that in their household, that can vary. The stress that a parent may have, whether it's at work or in their life in general. Their education and advice from a trusted source. So the views of techniques, if they grew up with it in their house, there could be a higher chance that they're okay with physically disciplining their child because maybe that's how they learn. Stress, if they had a long day at work and maybe you forgot to take the chicken out of the freezer before they got home, or maybe, I don't know, you broke the kitchen or the closet mirror in your room, doing something dumb in your room, I don't know, and they come home stressed and they just lash out their anger on you, that's possible. Other education, if they're not aware of the effects that it could possibly do to an adolescent mind or a toddler's mind, if you're constantly either doing the violence to them or to other people. They may not know the effects, and I don't know what trusted sources besides uneducated siblings they would tell them to hit their kids, but no online source would probably tell them that. Which leads us to the effects of physical discipline. A study done by William Sears, who attended Harvard and has been studying medicine for 40 years. He did a study that said, and he's funded by the National Health Institute also. He says the more frequently a child has been physically disciplined, the more likely he would be aggressive to peers and family members. So if a child is constantly just being hit or spanked or whatever it is that's going on, they're more likely to be angry to their siblings, to their families, to their aunts. It's a growing anger that reflects on the parents. So the more that you see a child being angry, it's a higher chance that that's what they're seeing at home, that's what's being displayed. So that's all they know, and that's what they're probably going to go do. And everybody has the potential to be a criminal as a child, but according to a study also done by Dr. William Sears, violence in a household it increases the percentages for a violent criminal to be created. And yes, everyone has that potential, but those rates are higher in those types of violent households. And a study done by Time magazine says that adults who received a lot of physical punishment as teenagers had a rate of spouse beating that was 4 times greater than those whose parents did not hit them. So for young boys, if they see that type of violence in the household, they'll probably grow up thinking that it's okay to put their hands on their significant other, and that's not true. And for young girls who probably see large amounts of violence like that, they probably learn it's okay for someone else to put their hands on me, and that's not true either. And for both of them, they probably just understand that the stronger person, the more violent person is going to get their way, and that's right, and that's not right either. So, and alternatives to physical discipline in an article featured on Psychology Today by Paul C. Hollinger, who's a psychoanalyst and psychiatrist for Rush Medical University Center. He says that alternatives are talking instead of acting, so nobody's not going to get mad, no parents are not going to be frustrated, so instead of screaming and yelling, or I don't know what people do, throw stuff at walls, you can like just talk to your significant other and show like your children, like instead of doing violent acts, like you can just talk it out. You can listen to your child when they have frustrations, maybe just like listen to them, don't automatically shut them out. They can have opinions too, and they're just trying to get their message across, like of what they want or what it is that's making them frustrated. Explain your reasoning, like for giving them like a timeout or something, like for instance, like walking in the street without looking both ways. I think that like deserves to get something taken away, or denied an ice cream, or denied something, like something taken away, like learn, like that's not what like you're supposed to do to be safe, or the consequences would be a lot worse. Positive reinforcements when they act the proper way in public, or they're just, or anywhere not in public, but just like if they're just displaying like the type of behavior that's acceptable, like let them know like, yeah, that's a good thing to do, that's how you act, that's how you're supposed to be. You have to set a good example for your child as well. So like I said earlier in the communicating part of it, if you just have to display like positive examples, and they are a reflection, children are a reflection of their parents mostly in their childhood until like they learn like not to be like their parents, but the parents are a reflection, and if you just set a good example, they'll learn the right way and they'll know what to do. So in conclusion, physical discipline should not be incorporated into parenting in any way, shape, or form for any of the reasons that parents may have to give physical discipline to their child, for the effects that go on after, but there are lots of alternatives for physical discipline, and we should engage them as parents, because we will probably all be one day, or we probably already are. Thank you.
We should stamp our feet and make more noise.
Thank you.
And Lula's not here. Okay, well. All right, Eric, you know what a fan I am of audience surveys at the beginning of the speech, but I thought yours worked relatively well, especially when you had the follow-up with the statistic to go along with it, so that kind of diminishes the notion that you're just making something up on the spur of the moment. The subject clear from the beginning, you have a very clear code of value that you're arguing for, and you've got two claims of fact that you're going to be advocating here. I do think that in the development of that material that there's some general research that's referred to. It's not very particular, and I think you need to cite it a little bit more clearly. I know that you're trying to avoid having to read a bunch of stuff, and that's one of the reasons that it probably feels a little bit sketchier. But there's good background information on why some of these things could be problematic. You kind of assume that everybody knows that these things are true without necessarily proving them, and I think that that's, like I said, a little bit of a weakness. There was a place where you signposted one of the harms, but it was phrased a little bit awkwardly, and I can't remember the exact phrasing here. If I was looking at all of your notes in the speech, I'd be able to pick it out, or if I listened to it again. It was a little odd. It was clear that you had changed subjects, but the way you said it made it sound, I think, less persuasive and more, frustrated. The idea of anger escalation, I think you kind of visualized some examples for us. I do think we could use a few examples here, something that ties this into reality, that puts it outside of the realm of just something that is discussed in the laboratory or in a class, not a classroom, but in a research context, but rather something that really, here's an example of a kid who's gone through these problems, or here's parents that have lost control of their family as a result of trying to do things a particular way. So you can tie it a little bit more into reality. The link to domestic violence, I thought that you did okay on, kind of explaining why there might be a perceived relationship between those points. Again, I think some evidence could be done. By the way, you mentioned this, and I'm going to mention this to other people as well. I think I may have said it before. Time Magazine does not do its own research. They're reporting on somebody else's research, so they didn't conduct a study. They might have conducted a survey. That's a possibility, but when it comes to a study, they're just reporting on a study. So make sure that you quote the study as best you can. Or say Time Magazine reported on a study that was done. Let's give proper attribution to the work that's going on there. The discussion of solutions is okay. Again, this is another place where I think you could use some examples to illustrate the point. It's a little generic here. Presentation, I think, is relatively solid. Like, you do have to look down a bit. You have a tendency to do that, but I could tell that you were trying to look at us for the most part. It's actually very fluent as you're presenting it, so I think that helps quite a bit as well. All right, thank you.